So today it's very much about confusion species and Tenerals, but it's very obvious that we're going to need some more field notes and field experience. So Jon's going to be your main obviously the main speaker today, with Dion and just a tiny little bits of contribution from me down here. You'll have to excuse the humour in this. I'm sorry, it's all Jon's fault. So just to set the tone for today, we've had our introduction session to Dungeons and Dragons. We've had the identification. Those presentations are available as PDF documents. If anybody hasn't got them and wants them, please email me. So now we're going to sort of just confuse things a little bit and see where we can get. But the object really is to show where there is likely to be confusion, and then really how to overcome it. So it's quick recap. That's the species list that we're looking at. These are our local species. There are likely to be more that are coming into the area. So always in your mind is, does it fit into one of the species that we're expecting, or is it a potential confusion? Another species that's come in. Photographs are really important. When it comes to damselflies, it's a really good idea to focus on that second abdominal section and on the wing spots and on the back of on the eyes, on the areas toward the back of the where the eyes are up at the top. With dragonflies, it's look at the body. So if you've got a focus on your camera, try to get that abdominal pattern of dragonfly. With the damselflies, it's a much more of an oblique shot. We can cover that in a little while. But one of the things we need to talk about today is the genders, and it should be mostly fairly obvious, but there are also some of these species that do demonstrate androgyny of some form or another. So we do get some little bits of confusion that come in from that. So males and females, we're going to show you how to recognise those, and then don't be surprised at some of the features that you might be seeing on some of the damselflies and dragonflies do actually appear, and you can sometimes get some that don't quite fit in there. So really, from now till the end, it's over to Jon.
Thanks for turning up today, showing an interest in going that extra stage with these damselflies and dragonflies, and hopefully I can clear up any points that you've got, any confusion points that you may have. You're quite welcome to ask me questions throughout. So we'll start with the genders to start with. Now, usually when you see the males, they're usually in tandem with the females if they're by water. So you can generally know that the female, even though she's going to be a different colour to the male, is the female of that species, because they won't be in tandem for any other reason. And then they'll stay in tandem for a while and then usually go into what's called incop for copulation, which is where they fully join up like this. The female will curve her abdomen round and join the male's what's known as second genitalia up there. If I just tell you a little bit about that, all dragonflies and damselflies clasp their partners. The males always clasp their female partners in damselflies on what's known as the pronotum, which is a shield, it's like a chitinous shield over the top of the prothorax. And dragonflies, true dragonflies, always clasp the females on the head, behind the eyes, and just slightly in front of the eyes. They have two different sets of claspers, depending whether it's a true dragonfly or a damselfly. But they always are seen in tandem, like this here. And they can fly around for some time like this until they finally go into cop, where they're copulating, and that can take seconds or just minutes in some species to quite a long time. In, for example, the blue-tailed damselfly can be 6 hours, because the blue-tailed damselfly is one of the only damselflies that oviposits on its own. The male will part company with the female, and the female one would oviposit on its own, and they usually do that towards the end of the day. The blue-tailed one is the only one that does that. All the other ones, when they're actually laying eggs, will be in tandem together. The male usually does what's called the sentinel position, like this, sitting up really quite straight above the female while she does the egg laying. So this process with dragonflies and damselflies goes back millions and millions of years. They think that originally the female used to pick the male sperm up from the ground itself, and they used to actually reproduce in the same way as many other insects. But because of various predatory reasons and things like that, they developed this aspect of the second genitalia up there. So what the male actually does is, prior, or sometimes even when he's in tandem with the female, he transfers his sperm from the genitalia here, where he produces the sperm here, up to the secondary genitalia, where the sperm is stored. And then when they're in cop, like that, when the female's in cop and then she joins up with the secondary genitalia, the male sometimes will remove the sperm. He's got special hooks on his genitalia known as hamules, and they can literally go in to the on the sides of the hamules. They've got hooks which can go inside the female into what's called a bursa, where she stores the sperm, and literally pulls the sperm out of any previous matings and disposes of that, and then introduces his own sperm, and then they will actually copulate like this. So she gets the sperm of the current male, and that's generally how it's done. I mean, I could talk to you for ages and ages and ages about it, how it actually works, but it's just fascinating. A lot of people, when they see this, they think it forms a heart shape. You know, it's kind of a very magical kind of shape. It's not always quite. It depends on the species whether it gets a nice heart shape or not, really. But generally, that's how the mating goes. And you can always tell, if you can identify the male when you see them like this, which is probably the easiest one for people to identify, you can bet your bottom dollar that the female is the female of that species, because they all have different anal appendages on the end of the abdomen here. The appendages that secure the abdomen to the pronotum are different on every species, so they can't intermix with each other. So if an azure damselfly tried to mate with a variable, they couldn't quite hook together correctly. So that prevents them from hybridizing or doing anything like that. Although sometimes you will see a variable and an azure trying to do that, but they'll find out they can't, and it doesn't happen. So if we move over to the female damselfly. Now, when you're identifying damselflies, to identify the females, all female damselflies have an ovipositor like this on the 8th and 9th segment of their abdomen. All damselflies have that. I'll get my pointer here. Oops, sorry. Start, take two. All female damselflies have what's known as a true ovipositor, which cuts into vegetation and plants to enable them to lay their eggs in plants. It's called endophytic oviposition. It means laying the eggs within the plant. And all eggs of damselflies that have ovipositors are cylindrical shapes. They all lay cylindrical eggs. Whereas dragonflies, there's only one family of dragonflies that has a true ovipositor, and that's the aeshnids, the hawkers and the emperors. They have true ovipositors. All other true dragonflies do not have an ovipositor like that. They just have what's known as a vulvar scale, which is a scale, like if you imagine a snake scale, I suppose, at the end here, which is like a flap that comes down. And all the dragonflies that have the vulvar scale deposit their eggs in water, which is called exophytic oviposition, dropping the eggs in the water. You see them dipping eggs in the water. So all damselflies have a true ovipositor, and all the aeshnids, the hawkers, have a true ovipositor, but all other dragonflies don't. So getting back to damselflies then, if you want to tell whether it's a female or a male that you're seeing, because often when they're in their teneral stage or their immature stage, they don't have their full coloration at that point. So it can sometimes be hard to know what species it is or whether it's a male or a female. If you can get a side-on view like this, you can tell the female will have this ovipositor. The male will have a flush abdomen. It will be completely flush. The male will have a lump on his second or third section of his abdomen, which is the secondary genitalia that I was talking about earlier on. Just out of interest, this little bit here, which you'll see, is used to test the plants. They test the plant to see whether they can actually, whether it's good enough to lay their eggs in, and it's known as styly or a stylus. That's the reason I've put the record there. So this is known as a stylus, and a lot of people liken this to a tin opener, courtesy of Fred there. So as you can see, they literally kind of saw their way into the vegetation and lay the eggs. Dragonflies and damselflies that lay their eggs like this lay a lot slower than ones that drop the eggs in the water. Their mode of depositing eggs is a lot slower than the ones that actually just drop the eggs in the water. So that's how we tell a female damselfly. If you look at the end of the abdomen, you will see this protrusion here, and you'll know that that is a female. Likewise with the hawkers as well, you'll see the protrusion on those. Female damselfly, here we go. So it's just an example of a full size one. You can see that the bulb, when you're looking at it, obviously they're a lot smaller than this in the field. It'd be great if they were this size. They're actually fantastic. You can definitely tell. You can literally pick them up. But you can see that the ovipositor is pretty obvious there. And you can even see the stylus on the end of that one there. The little device for testing whether the plant is the correct plant to lay its eggs in. And you can see here that the abdomen is completely flush. There's no lump here or bulbous section here at all. So that points to that being female. So there we have a male as an example for you. So there you can see pretty flush here. There's a slight lump there. That's just the shape of the abdomen there because he has to store sperm in there initially. There's a lot of sperm stored at this end, which is transferred to this end here. And then this part here is the main copulatory device, the main secondary genitalia there. You can definitely see a swelling here. So whether it's a teneral, whether it's just emerged, whether it's an immature, whether it's a mature, or whether it's lucky enough to become quite old, a few weeks or a few months, it's still going to have these features. So you can tell whether it's male or female because of that. Just another picture of true dragonflies. These are the beautiful golden ring dragonflies, not so common in this immediate area, but they are in some of the outlying areas around here. Dion over here kind of runs a place called Cartgate down by the A303, where we've seen the golden ring dragonflies. But the golden ring is an interesting one. just out of interest for everybody, I was talking about the ovipositors on the male, on the females, and the secondary genitalia on the males. The golden ring female is our longest species in length. It's not our bulkiest species, but it's the longest one. The female one is, because the female has a very long, what seems like an ovipositor here, but it's not. It's an extended vulvar scale. It's still a scale. They don't lay their eggs in plants. They dip their eggs in soft sediment in running water. So you'll see them dipping their eggs, and they use that scale to dip the eggs. So that's got no serrations on it, and it doesn't cut into vegetation or anything like that to put the eggs in.
It's like a garden trowel.
Yeah, a bit like a trowel, really. It's just like a dipping trowel. So they're like an intermediate, really. They've got a very long vulvar scale. But here you can see they're still doing the same process as the damselflies were doing earlier. So you can see the only difference here, being that these are true dragonflies, is the dragonflies always clasp the female just behind the eyes. They have 3 claspers. 2 of the main ones are called cerci, which they use to hold the back of the eyes. And then they've got another one that comes slightly through, if you see how it works, through the eyes. Often, some of the females that have been in COP and have actually bred a few times can have slightly damaged eyes because of that, but it doesn't seem to hinder them in any way, shape or form. But the eyes can become slightly damaged. Just a close-up section on the genitalia and of the different male and the female here. So you can see here, this is a male. You can see the secondary genitalia again here under the second and just extending slightly into the third abdominal segment. This is an enlarged view of it. These parts here are called hamules, and they literally hook the female into position. So when the female curves round, they're like clasps, really, that clamp on. In here you can see the penis, which is inserted inside the female, and it has several kind of devices, as you might call them, which remove sperm. They're literally just to scrape out sperm from the female so that the male can then insert his own sperm. These sections here. And then you can see there's the 8 anal appendages again. I mentioned these are the top ones are called cerci. There's 2 of them, and there's one lower one called an epiproct, which is the one that goes between the eyes. This is the difference between dragonflies and damselflies is damselflies have 4 anal appendages, whereas dragonflies only have 3. Here's again is a close-up of the female anal appendages. Here you can see the ovipositor. You can see this little stylus there coming down. These serrations here, these serrated bits here, are literally for cutting into the vegetation so that the eggs can be put into the vegetation. As an example of a female true dragonfly. They know dragonflies, they're all Anisoptera, all known as true dragonflies, whereas Zygoptera are known as damselflies. But overall, everybody calls them dragonflies. But the true dragonflies are these. So you can see here we've got the bulbous ovipositor again, the stylus, and the serrated bits there are slightly inclined. They're not, because she's not actually egg laying at this point. They're slightly more inclined. And you can see that there's no bulbous lumps coming down here at all, no secondary genitalia. So you could be 100% sure that if you saw that, you'd know that it was the female of the species. Most people know the coloration of the males. They get good at that because it's the male ones that are predominant all the time. And it's the male ones that you probably see more than the females. But if you see a female like this, you'll know then you've got to try and identify what species that is. It'll usually be it's usually the spots are the different colours. Usually they'll either be blue in a male and green or yellow in a female, depending on the species. So the only way to really know what species it is to literally learn it really and kind of identify it. The sides of the thorax are a giveaway as well. The panels on the side of the thorax here, these panels are all different on every single orca dragonfly and emperor dragonfly. The emperors come under the same family, the relationships. So these panels here, these markings here that we get, which are on the sutures are the creases in the thorax that enable it to kind of expand and contract. Sorry. Yeah, these marks on the sutures here and the antehumeral stripes on the humeral suture here are always different on every species. So that's quite a diagnostic feature, but they're exactly the same on the female and the male, but just a slightly different colour. So if it's a male, these will be bluer, sometimes a bit bluey green. On the female, a bit more green generally. On an immature, they'll always be the same. So if you get to know the side of the thorax, it's a really good way of identifying exactly what species it is, whether it's immature or it's a teneral even, you can still see that. On the tenerals, everything's a bit more faded, but we'll come to that a little bit later on. There is a dragonfly book, I think most people have probably got it, called Identifying British Dragonfly. Yeah, this book here, Britain's Dragonflies, that literally has got the sides of the thorax in it for people to kind of learn, or if you take a photograph of it, if you're out in the field and you go home, you can then compare it with the side of the thorax. So if it was a female that you got and you wasn't sure what species it was because of the colour, you could identify it in that book.
It's also in the slides from the previous presentation.
It's also in the slides from the previous presentation. Hind wing shape. Now, this is a good way to identify males and females as well, especially in the hawkers. Not the emperor, and not the hawker that's known as the hairy hawker. The hairy hawker doesn't do this, and the emperor doesn't. But all other dragonflies that are hawkers, be it the migrant hawker, the southern migrant hawker, have always got an angled hind wing margin. So here, if you look here on the male, it's a very sharp angle in the hind wing. On the female, it's got a nice curve to it, like that. So in the male, it's always angled, and in the female, it's a nice curve like that. And that's true of all the hawkers, and it's true of some of the emeralds and the clubtail as well, but we don't need to talk about those because they're not around here. But that doesn't happen in the libellulids, which are the darters, the skimmers, and the chasers. The darters and the skimmers and the chasers all have rounded wings, be them male or female. The emperor,
males have this nice angle
yes,
six pack.
The males always have that. Yeah, they have that nice angled bit there, so you can tell. The reason they have that, the reason the males have got an angled hind wing, is because of these species. They've got they look like little ears here on the second abdominal segment. They're known as auricles. And they're used as well to, when the female lines up her body for copulation, they're used to line the female up, the little auricles there. And so they have to have these angled wings so they don't bash into them when they're flying. So it's pretty much a design thing, really. The only Aeschnid that doesn't have these is the emperor and the hairy one, the one that you'll be seeing at the moment. The hairy one's the one that there's quite a few of them out at the moment. Both the male and the female hairy have curved wings like this, and so do the emperors, the lesser emperor, vagrant emperor, our emperor himself, they all have these curved hind wings. So that's just a little way of identifying males and females in the hawkers. I should go over to Fred for these sections, shouldn't I? All babies look alike, which is not really that true. So, here we go. So when dragonflies, true dragonflies and damselflies first emerge, they're very, very opaque, really, and they have a complete lack of pigmentation. There's no pigmentation in them at all. So, for example, if you come across something like this, early in the morning maybe, usually not during the daytime, because this species of dragonfly will have flown by then. But if they're this teneral, the best way to find out what species it is to look closely, as close as you can, at the markings on it, because the markings are the only thing that give away the species that it is when it's like this. You can look at things like, you can cut things down, like you can look and see if it's got angular wings, or if it hasn't got angular wings, and see whether it's a male or a female. The humeral stripes are a bit of a giveaway here, because that they differ in the different species. But it's very hard. A lot of people do find it quite difficult to determine what species they are like that. But you can just literally by the markings on them.
What more difficult with damselflies and dragonflies?
Yeah, especially the initial damselflies can be a very pale pink colour, so they can be almost impossible to identify. But to be honest, most people never see them that early. Most people will only see damselflies if you're out counting them, which is the object of this, and identifying which ones you're going to be seeing. Most of the time, you won't see extremely new teneral ones that have just emerged around. They'll be conspicuous by their absence, really.
Yes, you want to see them because the colours they are.
The what, sorry?
You want to see them because of the colours they are.
Yeah.
They blend in ever so well. You'll find them any time of the day, really, if you're looking.
Yeah.
But they are difficult to find.
This is the thing. If you're counting numbers of dragonflies and species, you probably won't really see many of the tenerals, and you can almost disregard it unless you want to get really into it, because to find them, you've got to be a lot slower and look around a lot more in detail and in depth. And if you're counting them and you're going down transects, you're not going to be spending that length of time at lots of different places, because you'll just be out for hours and hours. But you could do that as a separate exercise. You could go out and think, right, I'm just going to come out and find some tenerals today and try and identify them as a separate exercise. But it's not something that you'd want to do if you were trying to count the numbers or identify a particular species. So as Dion was saying, there's a damselfly here. Very, very, very difficult to identify what it is. Very difficult. There are certain giveaway features, and the only giveaway feature on that is that slightly darker 8th segment there, which puts it down to being an immature blue tail. But the blue tail will mature. All of them initially will have a blue section there. You can see it's like a darky brown colour, a sort of light oaty brown at the moment. So you could do that, but you don't really need to worry too much about the tenerals. Tenerals tend to stay in their teneral condition for 24 hours. And then their immature condition, before they're mature, 5 days to 2 weeks, depending on the species. So the larger dragonflies take longer to become mature. The little damselflies probably won't leave their area much when they're immature, so you will see immature ones around. The dragonflies tend to disperse a lot more and then come back to water bodies to breed and oviposit again when they're actually sexually mature. But because of the way damselflies are, because of their flight and that, they don't have the capacity to disperse. Some of them do. There are species that will disperse, but most of them tend to be very close to where they originated. There's a few pictures of some tenerals for you here. So it just shows you that when they're like this, they're hard to identify down to species.
I have to say, these particular images are absolutely stunning. They're from a guy called Terry Bagley, and I've never seen photographs of this quality before.
And they're brilliant, aren't they? Really, they're really close. The best thing if you want to identify these is to look to see whether they're male or female. And like I said earlier when I was describing the genitalia, that they're always going to be there. So you can tell instantly that this one's a female. Like this here, you can tell instantly up at the second segment you've got the lump, so that's a male there. Very hard to determine what the species is when they're this size, but these stripes here give it away as a red, large red. If you look at a large red damselfly when it's mature, it's got these stripes, yellow and black stripes on its side, and they're always there right from the day it emerges. But again, you won't really see many like that. So here we have this is to show you. Can you see okay there? This is to show you going through from being a teneral to a female or a male. It's probably better if I can move this on, really. So you can see on the teneral, the wings are very glassy, they haven't hardened up properly at this point. So its flight is their flight is quite fluttery anyway, but the flight's not going to be that good at the moment until the wings harden up. And they often just fly and go into a spider's web, or so many things happen to them at this point. Many of them never get to this stage. A lot of them fall foul of various things at this stage. But again, you can tell that that's a female here. Very difficult to know whether, if you saw it like this, whether it was the red-eyed. One of the things that gives it away are the black legs here and the slight redness in the eye where it's starting to change. And that's always there right at the beginning. But again, when you're out counting dragonflies and damselflies, as I keep saying, really, you're going to see more of them in the slightly more mature stage. So you're not going to see lots and lots of tenerals all flying around together. You're going to see more mature ones than you are tenerals. So it's really best just to concentrate on counting the mature ones and identifying the mature ones.
On the immatures, is there a big difference between the adults and the immatures, or are they kind of just?
There is exactly, going back to what I said on identifying that dragonfly, which was a common hawker, the patterns are the same. If you can see in there, if you can really get close, if you catch it and you analyse it, they're close. One other thing that you can tell what species it is, and you shouldn't catch tenerals because you'll damage them, but if you can get up close to it, which you usually can because it's a teneral and it hasn't maybe not made its maiden flight yet and it's a bit sensitive, it might just nudge around wherever it is. If you can get up to it and you can look at the pronotum, the best way of knowing what the species is, and that goes across the whole board from teneral to immature to mature to old, this section here on the thorax, this is called the prothorax. I was saying to the lady over there earlier on, this section here is called the prothorax. And this plate on the top of it is called a pronotum. It's like a shield. That's the section that the male damselfly connects to it with when they're going to go into tandem. So the rear side of that shield, the rear side of that has got a diagnostic feature on it. The shape of it is different in all damselflies. So if you really wanted to know what that was, you could look at the pronotum, and if you know the shape, and that book's good as well, the identification book, because it has all the pronotums in there. They're quite easy to learn. Some of them just go like this, just a slight curve. Some of them are straight. Some of them curve and they've got a lump comes down like that and out. Some of them have got a couple of lumps. But it's very diagnostic. That tells you exactly what the species is, whether it's teneral, female or male. You'll know exactly what it is if you know what the pronotum is. It's the best way. The other way, and you wouldn't really want to get into it because it's too detailed, are the anal appendages. So the anal appendages are different in all species, and they're diagnostic in all species. But it can be, unless you want to spend a few years doing it, it can be a bit complicated to do initially. The easiest way to do it is literally with the shape of the pronotum on something like this, if you're not sure what it is.
So in the field, the only really, I try to use my binoculars, I try to use my eyes. The only real way to do this is a photo and then blow it up.
It is, yeah.
A digital photo,
yeah.
and then make it bigger.
Yeah.
Somehow you've got to have a camera that's good enough to give you the quality that you can get.
Yeah, you've got to either do that or have a little net with you, because this won't matter too much, because usually there's lots of these. I mean, when these species are around, all these ones will be on lily pads, generally speaking, but when it gets duller, they'll come off the lily pads and come onto the marginal vegetation a bit. You can catch them and literally look at it and see exactly what it is in your net and handle it, because you'll then know all the others in the vicinity. Not all of them, because some will intermix with others, but the majority of them will be that particular species. So if you catch one, for example, if you're walking along a transect and there's lots of blue damselflies, you can bet your bottom dollar that most of them are azure ones, coupled with some variables intermixed here and there, and a few blues as well, common blue ones intermixed here and there. So you could catch a few and sort of work it out like that, really. But
that's what we found.
You wouldn't want to obsess over it too much, because you could spend half an hour, 3/4 an hour just in one little area doing that. And if you're counting them, you've pretty much got to get it 70% right, really. If you get 70% of them right, you're doing okay on it. You're going to miss a few things, and a few things you're not going to identify correctly. Or you'll see a lot of azures and there'll be a few variables and you won't see them, you won't necessarily know they're there. And it's difficult like that, because they're not things like, it's not like you're looking for big stag beetles or something which you can find individually or something, like that. You're looking for something that's en masse, really.
So the dragonflies are easier, because when they do land, they let you certainly the hairy do.
Yeah.
But the damsels will let you approach, but it's that much smaller that it's that much harder to make it die.
And like Fred was saying, another really good diagnostic thing is the second segment. They have a certain shape on the back of the segment, but
which they have their wings closed.
90% of the time you've got the wings closed and you're trying to look through the wings to see it, and then you'll think, I've got to get closer and closer, and you approach it and off it goes, and it didn't ever get it. You see what I mean? So it's best to do it. If you can do it from a distance, there are diagnostic features from a distance. So, for example, if you're walking along, I can't remember, it's called the North Drain up there. South Drain. That's south, yeah. So if you're walking along the South Drain, there are lily pads within the South Drain. So you will often see some of these on the lily pads. If you identify that it's got the red eyes here, and it's got the blue, it's literally got the blue segment on its 9th and 10th segment, and you can see that. You can't get it mixed up with the blue tail, because the blue tail's got its blue on the 8th segment. So if you see a blue segment like this and red eyes, and it's quite a large one, it's the red-eyed. And you will see the greener version with the red eyes amongst it. You know it's the female. The female does have blue on her tail, but it's only in the segments here. The abdominal segments, just there, you can see a slight bit of blue. So if they're together, you'll know it's a male and a female. The green one will be the female. The females are usually green, and the males start off actually greener, and then they turn this colour as they get older. So when they're immature, they can be like this. This is a female, but the males can be a bit green, but they will go blue. So the red-eyed ones are pretty much always on lily pads, always sitting on lily pads in the sun, and just hopping from one to another. Right, here we have the blue-tailed damselfly, and like I said earlier, you can see that the 8th segment is the prime blue section here. The blue, if you look at it sideways on, does come underneath, but if you mostly see them on the top, so you can't see that so well under there.
They were really easy to identify as well, and to me, the blue looked, compared to the other blue because it looked a bit more turquoise.
Yeah.
It was a bit more turquoisey.
Yeah, it can
rather
be.
than just sort of blue.
Yeah, blue. Yes. What shade of blue are we going to be? The blue does change with age slightly with them. Yeah, it gets slightly darker with age.
Okay, so they must be.
And they can, yeah, they'll be vibrant. Yeah, they're more vibrant when they're as the immatures first become mature. They're really quite vibrant. That's the most vibrant at that colour when you can really identify them. And with the blue tails, you'll notice they've got a triangular pterostigma here. I haven't mentioned the pterostigma yet, but it's another way of identifying different species. Most people know it as the wing spot here, but you can see in these they've got a two-tone wing spot.
We did notice yesterday with the even with the Tenerals that the wing spot was still two-tone, albeit beige to white.
Yeah, it's always two-tone, and it's always
clearly two-tone,
and it's always diamond shaped.
Yes.
Yeah, whereas the others are all oblong.
Yes.
If you think of an oblong, so they've got the diamond shape. So the blue-tailed damselfly, the Ischnura, have got these diamond-shaped wing spots here.
The other thing with them is the fact that the females can be different colours.
Yeah, I think our next slide's going to hit us on that one. I hope I'm not going too detailed, really, but I hope you're really sort of taking it all in. The thing is just to take in some of it. I've spent a lot of time really with dragonflies and damselflies, just enjoying them and loving them and doing the biology and everything to do with them. It takes a long time to learn it, and it's not a magic thing. It's just something. It's a bit like Dion. He knows something about everything in the natural world, and he spent all his life doing that kind of thing. Whereas myself, I've just spent a lot of time pretty much focused on dragonflies and damselflies, and it's the time you put in. But you don't need to put much in to know the very basics. Some of the basic features can be learned really quickly. This just shows you the broad-bodied chaser here. So you can see on the Tenerals, again, with a true dragonfly, they're usually, the wings are always the glassiest looking thing. They're very opaque, the wings. But again, it's still got, for example, on this species, it's still got a very broad body. So that's another feature to look for. The actual look of it, the shape of it, can give it away as well on a lot of the species. And you can see they've still got these yellow marks here on the edge of the abdomen, and you can tell it's a chaser simply because of that, and because it has these dark patterns, this dark infusion here in what's called the wing base. All chasers have got dark sections here, which get darker as they get older. So as they mature, the female tends to remain yellow and slightly darker here, so you can see in this picture here, and the darkness here just expands a little bit more and gets a bit darker. But obviously nothing changes in, what's the word, morphology. The shape of it is pretty much exactly the same. And the male is very slightly, not quite as wide, not quite as broad, but it's still broad, but it's still got the yellow bits here. You can still see the yellow sections on the male. So because it'll have a broad body with these little yellow half moon sections that you can see here, you'll know it's a broad body chase. They're pretty easy to identify. And again, underneath, for the males and females, the males will have the secondary genitalia. The females have got a slightly smaller lump called as I mentioned it earlier, the vulvar scale, because they drop their eggs in the water. They don't insert their eggs into plants. None of the chasers do. Excellent. Right from the time it emerges, the four-spotted chasers, you can see the four spots. So that's pretty obvious. Even on a Teneral four spot like that, you can see the four spots. So again, quite easy to tell. It's got the dark, you can tell it's a chaser because of the dark patches here. But also the four spots give it away as being the four-spotted. It's not quite as wide as the previous one on its abdomen, but it can be quite dark down here. Some people can think, oh, well, maybe that's a skimmer of some kind, but just look at the wings. Look at the wings first. Skimmers have all got clear wings. They've got no basal darkness at all on their wings. All the skimmers have completely clear wings. So you'll know that it's a chaser. And you'll know it's a four-spotted chaser because of the four spots. There is a four spot. There is one, as they get a bit more mature, that has a slightly darker end to the wing here. But and they are quite common. But it's still a four-spotted chaser.
We did see some of those yesterday.
What with the darker patches, yeah?
That seemed a bit smudgy. Yeah,
That's
that's
it.
from a distance.
Yeah.
But they're definitely shiny.
Yeah, they're quite easy to tell as long as it's the four spot. That's always the four spots.
Yeah,
I think most people know that. Not the terra stigma. Don't count those. Otherwise, they have 8 spots. And the scarce chaser, when the first scarce chaser emerges and the Tenerals emerge, they've got these, like, I call them they're like bell patterns here in black on the abdomen, and they're all the same colour. The males and the females pretty much look very similar when they first emerge. And the only way to really tell the difference is by the genitalia or the appendages down here. Whereas if you want to know whether it's a male or a female. But when you're recording these, that's not really necessary. You just really need to know whether it's a scarce chaser, really. You don't need to know if it's a male or female, but I'm telling you all that for your own, if you want to learn that sort of thing. It can be useful for certain things. So as they mature, the female stays pretty much the same. And these bell shapes stay on it like that. They can have a little bit of smudge on the end of the wings here. And the male gets pruinescence, which is this blue waxy coating on its abdomen. So that's a male. And this pretty much disappears. And the eye, as Dion rightly says there, the eyes turn blue as well. A lot of people get these muddled up with several kind of dragonflies. The orthectron species are often very similar to that as well. The skimmers, some of the what's called the keeled skimmer can be very, very similar. Or the black-tailed skimmer around here is probably very similar in some ways. But like I said earlier, the skimmers have completely clear wings. There are no black there are no black basal parts to the wings as you get on the chasers. So the chasers have all got dark basal parts to the wings, whereas the skimmers are clear. You can tell this one's had a bit of a mating session because of the pruinescence been removed here a bit. That's where the female's legs hang on to it, and they literally move. The waxy bloom is taken off, just moved off. You can like that wipe it off with your finger. They get even darker than that. They can literally get black when they get if they're very lucky and they get to old age. They can get extremely dark looking and very ragged wings, as we'll see later on. Well, that's fortunate. The black-tailed skimmer's next. There we are. So there's a Teneral black-tailed skimmer, and you can see glassy wings going into the female, which remains pretty much the same as the Teneral. The Teneral male is very much like this as well, but the Teneral male, like the previous scarce chaser, gets the pruinescence on it there, and it's got a more pointed tail. And they tend to rest with their wings forward like this, skimmers. Generally down on the floor in front, you'll be walking on the side of the street, and there'll be one literally on a log or a stone, literally soaking up the heat, and then they'll go off and skim across the top of the water and land. They're quite territorial, and they'll fight off other species that come into their territory. Another way of telling skimmers apart from other species is that all skimmers, and you can even see this in the Tenerals, whether it's a Teneral, a female or a male, if you look here in its wing, the leading edge of the wing is called the costa. The next vein here to there is called to what's called the node is called the subcosta. And just below the subcosta, the veins that go across here are bright yellow. They're very distinctive. In the sun, they're really, really yellow. If you look on that one, you can literally see the yellow veins coming, they literally light up. So all skimmers have got yellow cross veins there, across there. Even in the Teneral you can see them. So they're always there, just below the subcosta. This vein coming across here is called the radius, which takes it right across to the pterostigma here. These are the struts that really keep the wings firm. We could do a whole session on wings if we want sometime, but there we go. We'll move on to the next one.
The hairy has those yellow sort of veins as well.
It does, yeah, the hairy does. But the hairy is completely different looking insect, yeah, so you can't really mistake it for a chaser or a skimmer, really. So it's easy to determine what it is. So here we have the common darter. Again, when they're Tenerals, darters are quite difficult as Tenerals and females to tell apart from their different species. There are giveaway things that you can determine what species it is, which I will tell you. But the Tenerals and the females of the three, the common, the ruddy darter, and the red vein darter, are all very, very similar. They are slightly different in size, but similar in coloration. So again, Teneral darters are very small. So you can see here that when they emerge, they've got the glassy wings and they've got a kind of yellowy, browny look to their abdomens here. And as they mature, the female pretty much stays very similar, but slightly darker, with a hint of red on the common darter. And the male goes almost a rusty kind of red colour, like this, as you can see here. You can see the secondary genitalia there on the male, so you can determine that's a male quite easily there, but obviously because of the colour as well. Common darters, one way of telling the female common darter whether it is a female common darter is it's got black legs with yellow stripes on the legs, which when you see the ruddy darter, it hasn't. It's got black legs, completely black legs, so that you can see those yellow stripes quite easily there. So that's quite a diagnostic thing on the female common darter. The male also has black legs with red stripes on it, but because he's red, he's that rusty red colour, and he's usually, the abdomen is usually pretty much the same size all the way down it. It hasn't got what they call a waist in it or anything like that. It's usually quite straight. And they're very sociable, the darters. If you see them, you'll usually see quite a lot of them. And you can stand like this with them, with your hands out, and they literally come and settle on your hands. So you can literally, with darters, look at them really close and determine what species it is, and male and female. They'll fly off your hand to get an insect and come back again to the same place several times. They're quite sociable insects. So there we have a Teneral, a female, and a male common darter. They're lovely insects, quite small little ones. They're not big, robust dragonflies like the Asianids or anything like that. Red vein darter. Like I said with the previous one, the Tenerals and the females are this can be yellowy. They do tend to have these black diagnostic features here on the red vein, but the female tends to mature into something like this, quite browny, yellowy. The coloration does. I was reading a book. It's a book about biology of dragonflies, and their colour can vary depending on their diet. They can get fixated on particular insects, which can actually determine a certain colour in them. So they can vary in colour a bit, but they don't vary to the point where you wouldn't really be able to tell what it is. With the red vein darter, like the common darter, the legs are a blacky colour, but they've still got lines on them, yellow lines, in the male and the female. So you could think to yourself, this could be a common darter female. But what pretty much gives it away, this one hasn't matured fully, but it's going that way. The base of the eye here is blue, turns blue in the male and the female. It's the only darter that's got a blue base to its big compound eyes. So if you're not sure what it is, have a look at that. Because sometimes it can be quite hard. The female doesn't, the red veins in the female can be a bit yellowy sometimes, as opposed to red. So you wouldn't know it was a red vein darter. So it's best to look, the blue eyes give it away. Blue base to the eyes here, both in the male and the female. The male, you can see the red veins here in this basal part of the wing, just going up to this point. There are the red veins. So if you can see that as well, it's got the blue eyes, you'll know it's a red vein darter. The ruddy darter, again, as you can see in the Teneral and the female, very, very similar, although the ruddy tends to be quite bright in the female. It can be quite bright, but again, it depends on diet, it depends on light, refraction, depends how if the sun's on it or if it's dull or whatever it is. They can look slightly different, or how old they are, can vary a lot. But you can see that on the ruddy darter, you haven't got blue bases to the eyes. You've got greener bases to the eyes. And the ruddy darter's got totally black legs. It hasn't got yellow stripes on them. So if you look at its legs, you won't see the yellow stripes on the ruddy darter. The male has an incredibly wasted abdomen. You can see the abdomen, it pinches in. It's quite a small insect, I think, the ruddy darter primarily, but the abdomen is more pinched in than the common darter is.
So it's slightly smaller than the common darter.
It is, yeah. It's a slightly smaller insect, really. But it's hard to know. If you just saw a ruddy, you wouldn't necessarily be able to compare it to a common. You would think, well, you need all three of them together to kind of see the size.
Look for the wasted abdomen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the wasted abdomen is the thing on the male. And it's usually the males you'll see, and then you'll see them in tandem with the females. So if you see that with that, you're going to know it's the female.
So the female doesn't have the wasted abdomen.
The female hasn't got a wasted abdomen because they have to produce lots of eggs. The female's abdomen produces lots and lots of eggs. That's why it's so wide. If you dissect them, you'll see the amount of eggs that are inside them. Literally thousands of eggs, all in here. The eggs all come all the way down, and when they come out here, they have to pass. The male sperm sort of literally kind of, as they pass through the sperm as they're actually being laid, and then that fertilizes the eggs. But the male's bulkier. Sorry, the female's bulkier because the amount of eggs she's producing. The male doesn't have to have that bulk. Yeah, identifying the larger hawker dragonflies, there's not really that many in this part of the world really to identify successfully. And in their teneral state, you can see the colours, you can see the shapes in their abdomens, but they're very, very muted. There's no pigmentation in them at all. But if you look closely, that will help you, that's a diagnostic feature, the actual shapes if you get to know. The common hawker, you're not going to pretty much, I don't think you'll find that very much around these parts. I think it's up on the Mendips, but I've never ever seen one around here. It's not really the right habitat for it. Excuse me. The brown hawker is pretty obvious because it's brown. It's a big insect with beautiful brown wings. Lovely big insect. The emperor tends to have pretty much a black stripe, quite a wide black marking through it like this, all the way down, which it doesn't check, there's no kind of break through it, it's just all the way through it. So the emperor's like this with the blue each sides. If you see one like that with the green each side, then that's the female of the emperor. The hairy dragonfly has these more like pear-shaped markings on it, blue or yellowy green, depending on whether it's male or female, but they're exactly the same. The lesser emperor is pretty much not got much on it at all except up this end, and it's got a distinctive yellow band there with this blue section here like this, quite a muted blue section. There's quite a few lesser emperors around here now. Kind of Westade, isn't it, Fred? Yeah, Westade they've been seen. The migrant hawker, which there are loads of, and they get topped up by lots of migrants, literally. They breed here successfully, but they do get topped up by others coming over. So you literally see loads. I was out with Dion last year. We were walking around Cardiff. They were everywhere, down the lanes, everywhere. There'll be miles away from the water bodies that they emerge from as well. They'll be up in the trees along the hedgerows, walking for insects. So the migrant hawker is a smaller. I mean, its body's is quite a bit smaller than something like the southern hawker, but they have got distinctive markings on them. The southern hawker, the big distinctive thing about the southern hawker, which you can tell between all of them, is that the bands here go straight the way across. The last two bands always go across. No other one's got that. It's only the southern hawker does that. And they're different colour if they're, different colour bands. But they always go, the bands down here on the last segments go all the way across. They're not split like these in these others. But it's learning little things like that. It's learning like the Emperor's got the dark stripe, the hairy dragonfly. I mean, you can learn the patterns, but I tend to do the hairy dragonfly literally by how hairy it is and various things like that. And the time of year. Time of year as well, yes. As Dion said, you're not going to find many migrant hawkers around when the hairy dragonfly's around. The hairy dragonfly will be pretty much gone by the time the migrants are coming out. You'll get the occasional odd thing happening, one here and one there, but the mass of them, the bulk of them, won't be around at that same time.
The first dragonfly you'll see is probably a hairy.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
They should be around now. They are around now.
They are around now, that's quite.
So they'll be gone before some of the other ones. Yeah.
I don't like the name hairy dragonfly. I've never liked this, and I was talking to the Dragonfly Society about it again Friday. If you go to Ireland, the Irish dragonfly circuit, over in Ireland, the hairy dragonfly is known as the spring hawker.
Yeah,
And I so much like that, because you're not going to know, literally, because it comes out in the spring, hairy dragonfly. Yes, it is hairy, and it's an obvious feature that you can see on it, but I've never liked the ring of hairy dragonfly. I just much prefer spring hawker, but there we go.
Are they going to change that?
Yeah, they must have changed it to spring hawker, yeah. Yeah, okay.
You're up on
No health and safety. Yeah. So spring hawker, it'd be nice to do that. They are thinking of changing the names of a few of them, but we won't go into that one yet. So here we go. This is a picture of some of the hawkers for you. There's a Teneral common hawker. As you can see, the markings are pretty much identical, whether they're mature females or mature males in the Teneral. But you do have to get right in there to see it.
We'll take a 5-minute break at the end of the Tenerals.
Yeah, okay, it's fine. So this particular species are not, you won't really find those around here. I mean, I've never seen one. I mean, I haven't been spending a lot of time myself around this area. I'm getting to know it as I go, really. It's quite new to me, but what I've never seen a common hawker here.
You'll get them occasionally, but very, very rare.
Yeah.
If you get high winds somewhere, they may be blown off course and you'll pick them up. We're breeding them on the mend, so you get winds coming from that sort of direction. You'll find an occasional one down here. I have found one or two down here over the years, but
yeah. If you see one and you're not sure what it is, if you think, what the hell is this? The best diagnostic feature is its costa. Its costa is bright yellow. So the leading edge of the wing is yellow. I mean, other things are diagnostic, obviously, but look for a yellow, whereas most of the others are brown. You can see this yellow. There is one other that has a bit of yellow, but this is a very big insect, this one. So if you see quite a large hawker with a yellow mark in there, and on the male, that's the thin yellow antihumeral stripes, you'll know it's a common hawker. They've got a bit of a waist as well, as you can see. But like I say, Dion's been doing this for decades. I've never seen one here, so I don't think the area is quite right for them. But I think maybe up at places like Priddy you might find one. Here's the Emperor. So again, whether it's a Teneral or it's a mature, they've still got that dark stripe through here on all of them. So you can really tell that it's an emperor because of that. The female tends to be green, the male blue. Sometimes you will see a male and a female together ovipositing, and the female will be blue. There are very, very few females that are blue, but you can get blue females. So don't think it's something odd going on there. Some females are blue. 94% of them are green. I've only ever seen 20, 30, maybe 20. I've not seen many blue females myself, but I have seen them, but not that many. So they're very easy to tell. You can see they've got, whether it's a male or a female, I was mentioning at the beginning about the angular hind wings. The males don't have angular hind wings because they don't have auricles. They've just got lovely curved hind wings, same as the female. They're a different genus to the other ones. They're the Anax genus, so they're slightly different because of that reason. They were all given their names and various things by their wing venation and the shapes of their wings originally.
This is a great point. Just to take
Is
a
this-
little break. isn't it?
This is where we're going to have a break, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay,
Just
excellent.
just a 5-minute break. Because I think there's a lot of information in there about the Tenerals. There's about 10 more slides to go, and then then those who haven't had their lunch, we can get another bit, and then go off out for a walk, because I think the weather was actually due to get better at 1 o'clock.
Really? So that means 3:30 then, does it?
No. So
Well,
you probably all noticed that we've started introducing the scientific names in here and putting the meanings up there for them as well, which we hope will help people to use the names with some level of understanding of what they mean.
Mm.
So whether we've got them right. By the way, we haven't got a green light on here. Should we have?
Turn it around.
Oh, you took
I can
it
see
right.
it.
Okay. Okay, mate. You can see it. Yeah. Okay. Right.
Take
Back over to Jon for take 2.
Thank you. Yeah, like Fred was saying, the scientific names in dragonflies you had to use the scientific names to not really that long ago, 1937 in fact, early 40s, unlike butterflies, which all had generic names prior to that, whereas the scientific names for dragonflies were always used. You had to know what they were for every single species in this country and worldwide. Well, you still do if you go to other parts of the world. If you go to Hungary, for example, you'll find Anax Imperator, which is our emperor in Hungary, but he's not known as an emperor there. So you have to know, they wonder what you were talking about as such. That is, it's a strange thing. But
So the binomial always stays the same.
yeah, binomial's the same, always.
Always.
Yeah.
No.
Depends how far back you go.
Do change.
Yeah.
Take the peacock butterfly in Arcus IO was until 4 years ago, so 5 years ago, was Aglades IO. That's the
Yeah.
peacock butterfly. And the same, much
Yeah.
the same is true for grasshoppers. Scientific names are no more stable than common.
Yeah, they're really not. They've been stable
But-
longer, haven't they? If you
But
go back
they do tend to be much more regional.
yeah,
So the country will stick with its common name, albeit there are that varies across the country in different cantons. But by and large, the common names of dragonflies and damselflies do tend to be
right.
say, British Isles.
Excluding Ireland sometimes, as with our spring hawker.
Yes, there's a couple. So there
Yeah.
are, and there's a couple that really need to be changed and probably will be changed.
Yeah.
But scientific names, always this argument about, they're always stable. No, they're not.
No.
They change as well.
Yeah. You can only say they were stable at this moment in time, in as much as if you go to France, Anax is France now. But if you went back 100 years ago, they wouldn't be. When we were talking about that the other day, weren't we, with Linnaeus, and how he only described just a few dragonflies, libellula, and then it went to Fabricius, who did most of the species, and then Dascelis Longchamps, who did a lot, and they changed at each point. The scientific names changed at each point, but they've still had the scientific names? By name of names.
I know we don't want to digress
No,
too much in this, but Linnaeus gave his credit so much for giving all the scientific names for classifications. If you look back at his 1780 book, I've got a copy of it, but if you look back at that, all the butterflies, they are all named Papilio, and then the species is actually the cast list from the Trojan Wars. And all of the species literally go down through the King of Troy, so it goes through Priam, it goes through Hercules, it goes through all the rest of the some of the Greek brought in some of the Greek legends as well. So he went through all of these. He's got Achilles in there, he's got a whole lot. He's even got the crew of the Argus. So those names didn't actually last very long. So you go through this and just sort of think, oh, Linnaeus gave the names. No, there are, as John's just said, about a guy called Fabricus who came after Linnaeus.
Yeah, he was a pupil, or he was one of his pupils.
And he gave meaning to the names. So a lot of what you're seeing here, a lot of the interpretations you're seeing here, the reason we've given them their interpretative is to try and show where there's some information that's associated that helps you remember or tells you something about that particular. And that's the reason we're putting those up there.
And the common names are just really given to get to garner more interest with more people, because they found that not so many people were interested in dragonflies in the turn of the century, in 1928, for example, or 1919. So they thought, well, give them common names and we can get people's interest in them. And people's interest did sort of go up more when they were called things like common hawker.
And hawker tells you something.
Yeah.
Darter tells you something.
Chaser
It tells you something. Chaser tells you. They actually do tell you a lot about the way that the animals behave. So the names are actually not just nomenclature; they are actually meaning.
They've got some kind of meaning. They bear some relation to what it does. Don't
Yeah.
They? Yeah.
So sorry, I didn't.
No, that's all right.
I didn't
That's
want to digress on
an
that.
interjection of interest.
Anyway, there you go.
So we'll carry on then. So
Carry on.
one of the lads just had to go and get his sandwich. I
That's
think.
all right. That's all right.
You think
Yes,
you'll-
Joseph will come. Yeah, he'll pop back in. So,
Because this is an interesting thing for him. I think it does. I'll just wait for him to come.
oh, God, it took me ages to get
Well, no,
this.
we've just all been waiting. We've just been waiting.
There you go, guys.
Eat it outside.
I'm showing you
Right.
what you could have done.
We'll move on to some variants now in some of the species. So the blue-tailed damselfly, the Ischnura genus, are one of the more difficult ones to identify. Somebody mentioned it to me, I can't remember who exactly. But we were talking about the blue-tailed damselfly. The male is quite easy to identify, simply because it's got the blue tail and it's quite blue. Well, I think we've got a picture of one in a minute. But the thing that gives most people the most problem is you'll get a lot of these together and you will see a lot of immature females. So there are only two types of immature female. So the Tenerals you probably won't see. They're very washed out and they really haven't got the colour. But within a few days, 3 days, I think it is, 4 days, 3 or 4 days, the females will either become violet or they'll become this ruddy, reddy colour. These are known as violacea and these are known as rufescens. But both immature females always have the blue tail on the 8th segment. So you'll see the male with the blue tail on the 8th segment. You'll see these two versions of a female with the blue tail on the 8th segment. So you'll know that if you see a violet damselfly like this with a blue segment there, or a red, ruddy red one, rufescens, with a blue segment there, that they are female blue-tailed damselflies and nothing else. That's what they'll be. But they do mature The violet one, this is the most difficult thing for most people. The violet one will either mature into two types. Typical, which kind of resembles the male very closely. So if you see a blue-tailed damselfly still with the 8th segment blue, but thorax blue, anti-humeral stripes blue, very much like the male. Typica. That is a very mature form of the violet one. It becomes that one. But it's still a blue-tailed damselfly because it's got that 8th segment. So all of these three can be identified quite easy if you remember the 8th segment and those two colours. I'm not going to go too quick on this. So that's one aspect of it. The other thing, the violet one, sometimes, probably, I don't know what the percentage is, probably 40%. I'm trying to think now, more or less becomes infusions. This one. It's a very dark looking insect. And the blue tail is the section that is the blue tail is always there on the 8th segment, but it turns a kind of browny blue. It's blue with a bit of brown to it. But the segment is always in exactly the same place. There's no other damselfly that will have just that segment. I'm not going to go on to the scarce blue tail because we've not got him around. We haven't got the scarce blue tail here. But the blue tail always has this brown segment here on the infusions one. And if you see one of these with these greenish anti-humeral stripes and very small postocular spots, those postocular spots are the smallest of most damselflies. They're small, it's got the stripes which are green, and it's still got the mark there, but it's very dark and hard to describe what it is. What the hell is this? Just look at the end here. If you see that, you'll know it's a mature female blue-tailed damselfly. A lot of them never get to that stage. Even the immatures, what they've classed as immatures, can breed. The red one and the violet one will be seen in cop together, and they can breed at the tail end of this stage. So as they're progressing to become matures and they're still this colour, they will still breed. But you'll usually see by the time they get this age, you'll see the male in cop with it, the male blue tail, which is obvious. So that will then tell you what that is, because there'll be the male with it. That's if they're lucky enough to get this old. So that's a very mature blue-tailed damselfly with the brown end there. So the violet one can become two colour types. Typica, which is like the male, and this infusions, which is still got the section that is coloured with a bit of blue each end, but mainly a brown colour there. The red one, the Rufescens one, as that matures, only matures into one type, known as Rufescens obsoleta, this one. And again, it's not so clear here. This 8th segment is still dark, just here, but the whole insect becomes very kind of browning. And it's very rare to see one of these. And it's very rare to see one because it's so mature that isn't in cop with the male. So you can bet your bottom dollar that if you see it, it's gonna be in cop with the male. And of course, the most diagnostic thing is the diamond-shaped pterostigma. So all of them have got a diamond-shaped pterostigma, unlike all the other blues, what they call bluets. They've all got diamond pterostigma as opposed to oblong pterostigma. So if you see something like this, and it's got the diamond pterostigma, it's a mature blue-tailed damselfly.
What colour would you call that?
Brown?
Kind of browny, wheaty colour. Yeah, beigey brown. But it'll usually be, if it's got to that stage, in cop with the male, because it's so mature, there's males around them all the time. These insects aren't going to be alone. They're not going to just be one here and you walk 20 yards and find another one. They're going to be lots of them, with lots of males and lots of females together. So they'll be in amongst them. There is a reason for all this, but that's another talk. So
no idea
In-
how many times I went through putting the slide together. John saying, no, you haven't got it right. You haven't got it right.
No, it's got to be right.
I don't understand.
It's got to be right. The thing is, when you study these things, I mean, there are forms of damselflies and dragonflies called intermedia as well, which are intermediates, slightly different colours that they go through as they mature to the colour that they stay at for a period of time. So you get Tenerals, they stay like this for a week and a bit, and then like this 5 weeks if they're lucky. You're going to see more of these though. More of these. I think you have some good pictures of those, didn't you? Some nice pictures of those. Yeah, they're really, really good. Has anybody got any questions about them? Sorry.
You would get those slightly different colours as well.
Yeah, that's the intermediates. Yeah, the intermediates. We're not even going to go there.
Not today.
We're not going to go to the intermediate forms, but the general forms of what you're going to find are these. So you're going to see a male like this. You're going to see females a lot like this, and you're going to see females on and off like this. But they've all got that distinctive bit there, and they've all got the diamond-shaped pterostigma. The diamond-shaped pterostigma are the giveaways. The pronotum is as well, but you never get close. You've got to catch them to look at that pronotum. You've literally got to catch them and have a look at it and see what it is. The pronotum tells you exactly what it is.
That's the best way.
But
Pterostigma is the best way.
yeah, pterostigma is by far the best way if you can get it. But these are quite interesting, really, because they're probably one of the only damselflies that tolerates any kind of pollution at all. They tolerate polluted water up to a certain level. They tolerate saline water up to a certain level. They stay in cock or in tandem for 6 hours. The females only lay on their own. They only oviposit on their own. They're the only one that doesn't do that when they're not together. So the male's not on top. As I mentioned earlier, it's called the sentinel position. The male will stand up quite straight while the female's doing the ovipositing. They're the only one that doesn't do that. If you see something like this, ovipositing, or this, or that, the males will be around close by, ready to come back into action again when they need to. But if you see these ovipositing alone, they're going to be blue tails.
Can I just stress the point that John's just made in there about their tolerance toward pollutants? One of the really significant reasons for doing the monitoring is if we're seeing a change in proportion of damselflies in an area associated with some of the phosphate measurements that were conducted on those sites, it really will be one of those great indicators. Phosphates are having high phosphate levels are having important impact on them. So they are, it's the relative proportions of these against the other fluids that give great bio-indication.
They're an incredible insect. These one of my favourites. Just a quickie. I've mentioned this, and I think a lot of you remember this. The Ischnura genus is the only genus that can breed with just females that are parthenogenic. No other damselfly or dragonfly can do that. If you go to the east coast of America, the southern part, which you would call Florida, down through Mexico, all the way down to Costa Rica, there's a version of the Ischnura there known as the citrine forktail that breeds with a male and a female, just as they do here. So they have to have a male and a female, and they're in cock. But if you go to a group of islands known as the Azores, there's a huge population of the citrine forktail there, which is so closely related to this. There's parthenogenic. They're all females. They don't need none. They just give birth to female and female. But there's no males at all. It's the only damselfly and dragonfly that does that. There aren't any others that do that. It's the only one that's so far gone to be able to do that. So that's the citrine forktail. If you ever want to have a look at him. Sorry, I put it in my pocket there. I was going to get so carried away. I forgot where I put the stick. Right, let's move on then. So large red damselfly. Supposedly, it's the first one you see at the beginning of the season, and there's been quite a few of these out at the moment. Even going back 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was able to find quite. Were you with me at the time? I think Chadwick. Yeah, we saw quite a few of them, and the difficulty with this one, which isn't that difficult really, is the male is an insect very much like this, very red, but a mature male has red stripes here, red. An immature male has yellow ones. Mature's got red. So a male will look very much like that. There are 3 forms of the female. The typica, which is very similar to the male. It's slightly blacker here, very slightly, but very similar, but it does have these yellow stripes. There's the full vipes, which is this one here, which I think is closer to the male. It's an okay picture, but again has the yellow stripes, but it's got a bit more black on the end here, and it's a slightly darker insect. It's got more black here. And there's this one called the melanotum, which you don't see that often, which is pretty much, if you look at it down on it, it's black.
I'm seeing a very high number of melanotums.
Oh yeah.
Both on West Day, and we saw four of these yesterday. So I'm surprised. I've not seen as many of them.
Best feature on these is the eyes. If you look at these stripes on the eyes, that'll give it away as being a large red here. So if you just look at the eyes, and you can pretty much tell that. So if you see that and you're not sure, because there's not a lot of red on that, it's going to be the melanotum version. Only has a bit of red there, but it's got the stripes on the eyes. And again, as Dion was saying, if you caught one and you looked at the this part of the prothorax here, you'd see that it's got a different shape to all other damselflies. But the eyes are a good feature on those. So there's 3 forms of the large red. But I don't think they're quite big for a damselfly, and I don't think you can. This is probably the hardest one to know. But then just look at the eyes really. The rest of them are red. The male one does have red stripes though when he's mature. He has yellow stripes when he's immature, red when he's mature.
That's why the earliest ones you'll find is March. There's
There's quite a few around. Less obvious probably. Yeah, there's a few variants there on the 4-spotted chaser there. So you can see that there's a typical younger. There's a male one there. They don't get prunescence on these like the others do. You can see the 4 spots there. They're pretty obvious, really. I don't think you could ever mistake one of these. The female ones, this is an elderly female. You can tell that she's got a bit of a broken wing here. So she's very dark, very dark. And you can see on this one how dark she's actually becoming there. But she's still got the 4 spots, so you can tell it's a 4-spotted. And that particular version over there, the Prenubia, was the one I mentioned earlier, which is the spots are slightly smudged out a bit. So you've got a bit of a smudge around them here, and this at the end. And that can be more than that on some of them, even more. That's a typical Prenubia. It's exactly the same insect. Aging effects. I don't think they get rust like humans, do they?
Oh no.
There we go. As a typical male broad-bodied chaser. And we did this a bit earlier. And there's a typical female again, broad-bodied chaser. You can still see on this one, you can still see the slight yellow segments here, which tell you that it is. And it hasn't got the 4 spots, so you know it's not a 4-spotted one. But you can see how when they get old, that's a very lucky insect to get
Very
to that age. I mean, that's very, very lucky because their flight capabilities are reduced somewhat with the fact that some of the wings are missing. They can still fly pretty well. I mean, when you see them like this, they can really fly good. But you can see the damage this one's incurred at various points, usually to do with lots of things. Mating, getting in amongst vegetation and mating. They get in vegetation, they flap around and they break their wings or hit the wing on something, catch it on a thorn or something. Anything can happen, and it can tear a wing. So that's quite a fortunate one. It's not as old as it could be because the prunescence is still reasonably bright, but it's had a bit of a battered innings, that one. The prunescence will get even darker than that if it was really old.
Could be a bird.
Could be a bird, couldn't it?
Could be rain.
Could be rain.
Usually emerge.
Yeah, some of them get damaged as Tenerals, obviously, by the rain, and some of them have become successful insects. They actually can fly to a certain degree and mate and become mature and breed, even though they were damaged when they were Tenerals. Others that are damaged as Tenerals don't stand a chance. They literally just are predated on pretty much. They haven't got any capability of flying or anything like that. So there's a typical example of a scarce chaser. That's a lot of the females take on a male look when they get really old. When they get really old, they'll start to go darker and bluer. Although the females, in comparison to the males, when they're young mature insects, they will be slightly different. So a female will be like this, as I mentioned earlier, the orangey colour with the bell shapes, and the male will have the prunescence. But as they age, the male will literally go black and dark, and so will the female as well. And the eyes will go blue. So that's a lucky female there. They're pretty easy to know what they are, these, when you see them. I don't think many people have many problems with the chasers and the skimmers. The darters are the ones that give people a little bit of a problem, mainly the females I mentioned earlier, these. So we saw that earlier, the common darter with its slightly orangey abdomen here, orangey red. It's not as red as the ruddy darter. Example, remember it's got the black legs with the yellow stripes. Same with the female. Black legs with the yellow stripes. And you know that's not a red vein darter because the eyes aren't blue under here. If it's a red vein female, the eyes are going to be blue. I mentioned that. So they're not blue. There's an old female, really, really aging, getting a little bit of prunescence on it, in fact. But she's still got the yellow stripes on the legs. And the eyes aren't blue. Not as blue as they would be in the red vein darter. So you could tell that was an old common darter because the legs have still got the yellow stripes on them. If it was an old ruddy darter, they just have black legs. Yeah. When you catch it in the sunshine, the vibrancy of the colours is just magnificent. When they go from immature to mature and the colours are just really there, they're just beautiful. What that insect is doing there is shielding its thorax from the sun, so as the thorax doesn't overheat. These are called perchers. They always perch and they fly up to get an insect, come back and perch again, fly up, perch. And all this action warms up the thorax. And if it's 70 degrees, 80 degrees out there, they're going to get extremely warm. And every now and again, they do two things. They bring their wings over the abdomen to shield. It actually stops the sun rays on the abdomen. So it cools the abdomen to a certain degree. If they get too hot, they'll obelisk this one. Obelisk means they bend the abdomen straight up in the air like that. So they'll go along like this, and the abdomen will go up like that. It's called the obelisk position, so the sun doesn't. So they shield themselves from the sun. The ruddy dart and the common dart do that. as I mentioned earlier, you can tell that's a female. She's got black legs, green eyes. They're not blue, so it's not a red vein. It's not a red vein female. And there's an old female. Even on the red vein data, when they're old, it's still an element of blueness here, even though it goes darker. But it's still got the black legs, this one, so you can tell it's a ruddy. No yellow stripe on the legs.
The reason for mentioning all of these bits about the different things isn't to identify them. When you see them, you don't think you've suddenly found another species.
Yeah, because there are a few coming across. There's one called the yellow winged dart. There's a yellow winged dart as well coming across here, and there's one called the scarlet darter, which has been seen in Kent a couple of times, and that's a beautiful insect. It's so red, but you can't really miss that. But I don't think you're really going to be finding that around here yet.
The thing to be wary of is a female common darter have yellowy veins. Be aware of this.
That's a good point. Yeah, the female common darter can have yellowy veins in the wing, but
don't think you've got a yellow vein darter.
yeah, the yellow one is a lot more yellow. There's even more yellow to it. Yeah, wear and tear. That's a typical example of a very old insect with a lot of wear and tear on it. You can see the prunescence is wearing off here. The wings are torn here. The wings are torn there. Sorry? The tips have gone off the wings, yeah. They still manage to fly. Even these little the pterostigma's gone on that one. These are like a weighted cell. They're slightly thicker than all the other cells, the pterostigma, and they're kind of a bit of a balance, give them a bit of a balancing effect. A dragonfly literally can bend that section of its wing there like an aeroplane flap, can come down and come upwards like that. If you look at the cross section of a dragonfly wing, it undulates. It's not flat. If you look at them, you think it's flat, but it's not. It's undulated. It goes up and down like that. And it has all dragonflies and damselflies have 5 main veins in their wings, which you could call struts, I suppose, that come across. I won't go into the detail, but they've got 5 main veins. One at the leading edge here, which is the costa, and the veins that come across here. These veins here. This one here is the anal vein. Okay. So yeah.
The other thing about that is the Russian. I think you may have told you this before. There was a Russian that studied dragonflies back in the 1930s. By studying dragonflies, that's how the first helicopter was made. The helicopters, all the blades in a helicopter, balanced exactly the same as that wing. Yes.
And it was called the Dragonfly helicopter.
Igor Sikorsky, 1937.
Yeah. Now they're amazing when you look at the veins. When you look at the veins in them, I'll tell you a story about wing veins at the end if I'm allowed. It'll take me 30 seconds. just out of pure interest. There we go. More wear and these are just really pictures to show you things that can happen to dragonflies in this case, and damselflies over here. So this is really looks like he's been on a bombing mission over Dresden, and he's returned back like the old Lancasters used to come back, and he can still fly. Amazing. It's amazing to see. When you see them, you just have to think that's amazing that creature's still alive and hasn't been predated upon. But they can still, you still see them. They fly not so well, but they can still fly pretty well. Again, in this example here, here's a hairy that's coming to the end. His wings are being battered there.
I would say, was that old?
Not that long ago, really.
No.
There's a damselfly, sundew, which Dion knows lots about. He's got some fantastic, if everybody wants to see any fantastic photos of sundews eating damselflies, Dion's got some fantastic shots of that. And then we have a spider. Spider's webs are obviously, because damselflies keep low down in the vegetation, most of the time, if it gets a bit dull, and it's even in the sunny weather, they'll all be down in, you'll walk along a reen or the south drain, and they'll be in the vegetation. They'll be on the vegetation, copulating in the vegetation. So within that vegetation, there are spiders' webs all the time strung across, and every now and again, one goes into it.
We saw a lot of Tenerals yesterday in spiders' webs.
Yeah, spiders do take a lot of them. But then again, so does this. I mean, he tends to go quite low, but the hairy dragonfly will take those, take the azores and the variables as prey. I mean, the true dragonflies will take the damselflies as prey as well. And they can take that, and then a bird can take the hairy one.
Yeah.
It's the big cycle of things, really. But there we go. There's some good shots of.
Not surprising, I could not find any photographs of damselflies. All I could find was damsels in distress. Could not find any old.
Where'd you get him from?
any old damselflies. I suspect that they probably fall victim before aging.
Yeah.
Common,
yeah.
What would you say?
Yeah, fall victim before aging, definitely.
Well, I mean, birds are taken. Lots of birds are taken. Swallows are taken. Swifts are taken. Spiders, sandbirds. They all take them.
Do you think the damselfly was attracted to the insects on the sundew?
Yes.
Probably because damselflies.
Well, why was it attracted to the sundew?
Because
It don't have smell.
Because it's got
Got
other
insects.
insects.
damselflies, unlike true dragonflies, are what they call gleaners. They'll fly along, and there'll be an insect on a reed, and they'll literally glean. They'll just take it off. They won't catch it in flight. They do sometimes, but they take a lot of their insects actually off the vegetation. Dragonflies do as well, but most dragonflies take them in the air, whereas damselflies glean and go along. They're in amongst the vegetation. Oh, there's something. I'll have that. It sits amongst it, and off he goes. He gets that. Then he'll go into the spider's web, and the spider gets in. It's kind of how it kind of works.
It also runs when you look at where there are large crops of sundew out on the line of west, you can often find a lot of damselfly, some dragonfly wings around it, where the birds can come along, giving the opportunity for damselflies to pluck the thorax.
So that's the food chain 3 times. The damselflies going after the insect, and then
Yeah, the food is how it goes. It's just a big cycle.
Little habitat.
Yeah.
And that's why you see so many damselflies, because like frog spawn or anything, most of them lose their life. Most of them never even go into cop or anything. They're just food for other things, So there's so many of them. Oh, this is the questions time. I was just going to, what was I going to tell you about the, 2 questions in a second.
Oh, that was just a couple of extras.
That's just a couple of extra little things that you've got on there, is it? I'll flick back here. With dragonflies and damselflies on this planet, the oldest recorded dragonflies as we know them today are the Aeschynids, which are the hawkers and the emperors. They go back to the Jurassic period. So if you go back to the Jurassic period, you can find fossilized remains of dragonflies that are exactly the same ancestors of our ones today. So the emperor existed then, the same size and the same dragonfly. If you go back 325 million years, which is when Meganisoptera were around, what they call the griffin flies, they were large dragonflies. They were big, but they didn't have the flight capabilities of things like the emperor, so they could only glide. The larger ones, because there was a lot of air, they never had a pterostigma. They could only glide. So 325 million years ago, the really large ones were similar, morphologic, very similar, but they didn't have this node here. This node didn't exist. They could their wings were literally a bit wider, and they would glide all the time from one thing to another and use air to go around. That's what they found. So that's going back 325 million years ago. If you go back about 125, if you go back to the Jurassic period, that's when our first dragonflies were the fossilised remains of them are found. So you can find emperors and hawkers in the Jurassic period, and that's the period when the dinosaurs were around. So they're that old, and the aechinids, the emperors and the hawkers are classed as ancient dragonflies. They're the most ancient ones. The damselflies started to come around about the same time as well as that period. So the damselfly remains are there as well. So the hawkers and the emperors are classed as ancient dragonflies. And all ancient dragonflies have a discoidal cell in the wing. If you look at the wing here, there's a triangle. There it is. And on this wing, there's the same triangle. You can just see that triangle. It does the same each side. But the point of the triangle points outwards like that. So that's how you can tell an ancient species. Their wing pattern, the discoidal cell, which is this, points outwards. When you come to the darters, the chasers and the skimmers, they didn't come around till after the Jurassic period. They're a lot younger. They're a more advanced dragonfly. And if I can find a picture, sorry, just back, is it? The discoidal cell on the darters, chasers and skimmers. Yeah. Oh, sorry, it's technology. Yeah, oh, there we go. Have we got one flat?
Yep.
So as we can see it.
Yep. Just let me just see if I
It's
can-
just interesting when you look at the wings, you can see this and you can see the different wing venation in them. But they're a more ancient wing. The reason
There you go. Hang on.
you'll notice,
Press the go.
go forward, yeah?
It's all right. Just
Oh,
let
there we
just
go.
let that one run through.
Can you see it in there? Not very well, no, it's not as good. If I go and get one, I'll just explain it to you really quickly. I will explain it using this. The darters are much younger dragonflies. If you look at darters, they don't glide like the aechinids. The aechinids glide. To save energy, aechinids will fly and then they do swooping glides as well. Whereas the darters tend to fly up and perch. They perch a lot. And these are classed as a more advanced insects. These came around after the darters, the skimmers and the chasers came around after the aechinids. That's the hawkers and the emperors and the clubtails, which aren't aechinids, but they're ancient ones as well. But the discoidal cells on these, you can't see it in here. You can just about see it. Those triangles that I was telling you, on the ancient ones, the point always goes outwards like that. On these, the point goes that way on the upper wing, but it points distinctly downwards on the lower wing. You can just about see it on that.
Might be able to make it clearer on this one.
Because it's teneral, it's not quite. Yeah, there we go. You can see that there's the discoidal cell. So it's pointing downwards, that triangle. And on the one on the lower wing points outwards. So they basically, in a nutshell, on the aechinids and the ancient dragonflies, the cell points the same direction. In the younger ones, they point in two different directions on the wings. So that tells you if you've got a younger species. Oh, that's quite a good example.
There you go. It'll come back up and hang on. There you go.
Yeah, that's quite a good example. There's the discoidal cell. It's pointing downwards there.
All right.
And this is a discoidal cell here, this one. It points that way. Whereas on the aechinids, they both pointed that way. So that's
What's
how
the
you tell.
advantage that gives?
Advantage that they've got better flight. They've got better capacity to not overheat when they fly as much as the aechinids. They overheat more because of the flight. The aechinids have to glide a lot to stop them overheating. If you watch a hawker, it won't be flying all the time. It'll do lots of glides as well. It'll fly and it will glide. Whereas these don't glide. They fly. So they're a younger insect, really. Younger in as much as they're probably 100 million years old. And so 100 million years, 120 million years, 130 million years, the hawkers. If you go to the Natural History Museum in London, they've got fossilised remains of them. You literally can see them. And in their archives, they've got a hell of a lot of interesting stuff. You can get permission to see that. So it's just wonderful knowing all these different things. You can see all the main veins in these as well here as they cross across, which support the things, and they're all divided into cells. These are they're all different cells here. These cross veins here, you get that's a diagnostic feature as well on the species. These are called cross veins here, just at the front edge of the wing. All damselflies only have 2. If you look at a damselfly, it's only got 2 cross veins and no more. Dragonflies can have 14 to 16 cross veins there. The only exception is Caloptrix, which are the demoiselles. The banded demoiselle and the beautiful demoiselle can have several cross veins because they've got much greater wing venation for a damselfly than regular damselflies. So Caloptrix are a lot more, they're actually less advanced, but more beautiful. I think they're beautiful insects to look at. Well, I could go on all day talking to you about wonderful little things about dragonflies and damselflies. I mean, there's just so much you can touch on, and you end up going down different pathways and corridors and things because there's just so much of it, really. But I hope you've got something out of that today. I mean, I'm sorry if I bore you a little bit with certain bits here or may go off on a tangent there. It's just I am truly passionate about dragonflies and damselflies, and it's nice to share that with people. And if anybody's not sure of anything, just ask me. They're a thing, and at the end of the day, I'm always learning something new about a dragonfly and a damselfly. You never stop learning. I don't know everything. I think I know quite a bit, but I really don't know everything. And that's the exciting thing. There's always something to find out, or someone will have done a paper on something and you'll read it and you'll think, wow, and take you off somewhere else. There's always something to find out about them. So that's what kind of keeps you at it, I think, really. Yeah, thanks very much.
Jon, thanks very much.